It was not supposed to be like this, right? That idea of parenting in your head, the sweet baby who you love with all your heart sleeping peacefully wherever, handling all your old responsibilities like a rock star, watching your child grow to be oh so independent early on. This is not what it looks like. Perhaps you knew from the start that you wanted to be more hands-on and gentle. No sleep training, no punishments, maybe even some full-term breastfeeding mixed in. Maybe you didn't and just ended up parenting this way after meeting your baby and seeing what he or she needed. Regardless, it's not at all what you thought it would be. Instead, you're tired, stressed out, trying hard to remain calm and gentle in the face of difficulties, and perhaps most importantly, you feel alone. When you struggle, you're told you brought this on yourself for daring to decide to be gentle with your child or respond to his or her needs. When you're tired, you have to keep going or else nothing else gets done. When you feel alone, the doubt starts to creep in. Did you do this to yourself? What's wrong with you that no one else seems to struggle this way? Let me first say that you are not alone in feeling this way, and there is no shame in feeling this way. Parenting is hard, really hard, but it wasn't supposed to be like this. And so what you struggle with is a very real perversion of the parenting experience brought on by a culture that is, quite frankly, upside down. The first section of our webinar is all about exploring the whys behind this, because we have to fully understand our predicament before we can do anything about it. The keys to parenting. When we think about the things it takes to make parenting, especially gentle parenting, successful and, frankly, easy enough, there are 4 primary keys to consider. The first is support. This should come as no surprise to anyone, but feeling supported mentally and practically allows us to shift our focus away from the many other things going on around us towards that role of caring for another human being, a rather helpless and vulnerable one at that. Researchers have theorized that one of the reasons we survived and thrived as a culture in a historical sense is that women were cooperating and supporting one another, particularly in terms of child rearing. Computational models and anthropology have supported this theory, further highlighting that the entire survival of our species is in part linked to this notion of support. The second is realistic expectations, not of our children, but of us as parents. In a supportive environment, parents are tasked with certain things like caring for their children, helping with food and/or other work, and so on. At no point is one's sole expectation that of raising a child, but involvement in other things may be limited given the needs of the specific child. However, support for that child should come in abundance from others in the community, which allows parents to partake in other activities. The key is balance and the ability to put the right amount of time and energy into parenting and another amount of time and energy into other endeavors. The third is appreciation. We all know how important it is to feel valued for our work, and this is so crucial when it comes to parenting. We need to feel that all the work we do is valued by others, whether it's our partner, our family, our community, or even the children themselves. Often in parenting, the work is unseen or mental in nature. There's no quick task that gives us the sense of satisfaction, but rather the longer-term nature of it all means there's little inherent feedback to keep us going. Getting that feedback from others allows us to keep doing as we are and know that we are valued. Now, the final one is culture, or specifically a supportive culture. Good or bad, culture plays a large role in how we parent. And when we parent within the general cultural framing of parenting, things are easier. We aren't questioned, we don't have to justify decisions, and you have a host of people to turn to for information, guidance, and support. Think about breastfeeding as an example. One of the keys to successful breastfeeding is watching other women do it. If you grow up around it all the time, then you've got a greater chance of success because you've seen the realities and you know you have people you can go to if things go bottoms up. In fact, I want to read a statement from the findings of the Campbell River Indigenous Parenting Research Project undertaken at the University of British Columbia on who they feel supports families within their culture outside of family and friends. Quote, "With regards to the general public, support includes the universe, the city, the community, counselors, mentors, the nation, teachers, youth workers, elder workers, and the creator. Having extra support provides a sense of security and promotes the well-being of the family as a whole. Receiving the support of such community members has a positive influence not only on the child, but the family as a whole." Unquote. That's a lot of other people that are expected to care for us and our children. And so it's no wonder that if you do live in such a culture, parenting stress would be much lower. Okay, so we have our 4 keys to parenting here. The question now is, how do these fit within our own culture? Our Western, individualist, progress-driven, pseudo-capitalist culture. Not surprisingly, our culture has subverted all of these elements. Starting with support, I think we all know how little support there is for almost anyone these days. With the individualist mindset, the idea is that everyone should be able to handle everything themselves. And if they can't, it's a personal or moral failing, not a failing of the community around them. At the personal level, most people are not surrounded by friends and family who come to help with various things when someone has a new baby. They don't have people to come help clean and cook or do laundry. You may get visitors, but they want to hold a baby, and rarely for long enough for a nap or long bath or to help feel more human. And as soon as that new period has passed, any goodwill that comes often goes out the door, and parents return to being isolated and overwhelmed. But remember, in our culture, this is on the parents. Even expecting support is something to be frowned upon. Any help given should be taken with a smile, even if it's not actually helping, and one should never, ever complain. Because apparently this will go a long way to making parenting better, or so they say. Now, if we turn to the idea of realistic expectations, we see again how our culture has completely ignored the word realistic in this. New parents are expected to do all the things they did before, but also care for a baby who needs them just to stay alive. They are expected to get somewhat sleep deprived, ensure adequate care for the child, go to work, keep the house spotless, cook healthy homemade food, stay active socially with friends, especially those who don't have kids, save up for their child's education, save up for retirement, and so on. And if you can't keep up with all of this, you have failed. If you're able to get support for this, you're weak or lucky enough to deserve scorn from others. Again, there is no better way to make parents enjoy parenting than to set the bar so high they can only reach it by sacrificing something, usually either themselves or their child. Now, this also speaks to the problems with appreciation. In the individualist culture, there is little appreciation for others and what they do, and this has clearly extended to parenting. Not only is there no appreciation for parents and the immense work they do, because we don't feel we should need to appreciate others, but our culture values something other than the raising of human beings, namely money. And as far as we know, children don't make money. Therefore, for many, there is not only no appreciation of the work they do, but also a marked lack of appreciation for what they aren't doing, namely making more money or working for someone else to make them more money. Now, nowhere is this more clear than in the United States, which still doesn't even have mandated parental leave for new parents, highlighting that their real value is not to the children, but to the employer. Now, this is really important because although the US highlights this, the undervaluing of parenting happens in most Western cultures. Think about being asked, "What do you do?" and answering, "I'm a mom" or "I'm a dad." Most people who say that get followed up with, "But what else?" as if that isn't enough. We consider it a privilege to be able to stay home with our children for any period of time and have to justify this act by arguing about all the other things we can do because somehow caring for another human being isn't enough. And because it's not enough, we now have parents who cannot help but compare their child to every other child around, fearing that they have done something wrong because their child isn't the smartest, the fastest, the biggest, and so on. They have to justify their parenting through their children, and if their children don't live up, the failure falls on them. What a lovely way to make parents love parenting and children love their parents. I hope it goes without saying that by missing these first 3, we really don't have a supportive culture. In fact, in many ways, the individualist nature of our culture makes for even greater problems because we have so many options in how we choose to parent on the surface. And we're left to make that parenting decision independent of what it looks like on the larger community scale. But as I said, this is often on the surface only because we are not only an individualist culture, but we also have a streak of authoritarianism in play. That is, we expect people to listen to experts, and this helps push our cultural goals forward, something we'll talk about next. And if you go against these experts, you are again blamed for any and all misfortune. And this culture and the prominent experts inside do not support gentle parenting. And so any of us parenting in this way have been left out to dry. Furthermore, there are also some practical issues at play. For example, you may not have or qualify for parental leave depending on where you live and what you do. And if you do, you may not have it for both partners, leaving one working all day and the other home alone with a new baby, again, feeling isolated and overwhelmed. If or when parents return to work, there's a dearth of high-quality childcare options for most families, leaving them paying tons of money for others to care for their kids in ways they wouldn't be doing themselves. And these carers often aren't supporting the parenting of the individual families, but asking the child to fit into their plans for care, and the parents are expected to support that. At every turn, our culture turns on parents and families, forcing them to make choices that many of us would not find supportive in any way, shape, or form. Is anyone left wondering why parenting feels like an uphill battle in our culture? Scary thing is, we're not even done yet. Whose goals are they anyway? Now that we understand how our culture has subverted the keys to parenting, we have to ask ourselves why. Why would a culture do this? The answer lies in the goals for our society. Now, contrary to other societies, ours does not value the transmission of cultural knowledge and thus fails to consider the child as an essential component to the survival of one's culture. In cultures where children are valued, we often see how their value lies in maintaining special knowledge and practices that are seen as part of a greater good for this earth, whether this is through religious rites, such as maintaining connections with God, or through a stewardship of the earth. Our Western, independent, pseudo-capitalist culture values the person's contribution to economic well-being. Now, not the economic well-being of the individual, mind you, but the overall economic well-being of the community, and particularly for those in charge. Now, much like a feudal system, our society values the work in as much as they benefit the people on top. Now, this means that the goals for our society have to be to create these workers who will contribute. Children do not fall under this category and have been summarily dismissed as being of value, a fact that becomes obvious when we look at how our culture provides for children and how they provide economically for those whose jobs center on children, like school teachers, childcare workers, and so on. Parents who choose to raise their children are dismissed for not taking part in the cultural work of gaining capital. Childcare, schools, and how we treat parents are all a part of a system that is designed to fit into our cultural goals of our society. Now, we may place judgment on this because they're not our goals and they are not aligned with the ones that we want for our kids. But the fact remains that each culture has certain goals, and some align with our parenting goals and some do not. Now, this isn't an inherent good or bad about it in terms of how it affects parents, but rather how well they match the particular goals for our children. Now, please take a moment to think about what your goals are for your children. Do you have some? How well do you think they mesh with that of society? Now, I asked this question on social media, and the general gist of the answers I received fell under some broad categories, including 1, wanting our children to be happy, which almost everyone endorsed. 2, wanting our children to be good human beings towards others. 3, wanting our kids to work hard. And 4, wanting our kids to be successful, although how success was defined varied greatly. Now, if we think of these in terms of economic success, only the last 2 might be seen as fitting within that framework. But even then, many families defined hard work and success not in economic terms, but in terms of however the child might feel successful in his or herself. People wanted their children to love what they do, to work hard at it, but to not have it take over their lives. In short, these general themes we have for our hopes and goals for our kids have little to do with what our society hopes from them. Now, of course, some families also stated they wish their child would be economically secure. This isn't a surprise when the alternative can mean damning life results. However, this speaks to a culture that is not supportive. If someone is not independently economically secure, they cannot rely upon others for help when they need it. And as parents, that makes us worry. So some of us see the answer as fighting the very system we're in, whereas others see it as ensuring our children play by our society's rules, so they can have this culturally identified stability and success. This battle between our goals for our children's mental and emotional well-being versus the cultural goals of economic prosperity creates tension that lands squarely on our shoulders because we're tiny compared to our society, yet huge in influencing our children. This is why it's always good practice to ask yourself why you think others are pushing a different way. Is it because they actually believe it's best for your child? Or because they're pushing culturally prescribed ideas that meet those goals, not those of your parenting? The battle of biology. One of the more common concerns I hear when people are trying to focus on their parenting goals and getting away from mainstream ideas of what constitutes good parenting is that they doubt themselves when faced with criticism from others. And even when they know they're doing best for their kids, they then wonder why they care so much about what other people think. Not all of us do this, but it's an incredibly common phenomenon, especially for people who really don't have any supportive community. Now, these parents can feel guilty and even stupid for caring what other people think, but yet there's a very real reason for this effect, and that is the biological need to belong. It is remiss of any of us who talk about gentle parenting to do so without consideration of how hard it is to go against the grain. Now, we are a species, as mentioned above, that has thrived because of group cooperation. We are a social species, which means the importance of group belonging cannot and should not be underestimated. The idea of being alone in this world sounds bad, but the idea of being alone hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago out in the wild was a matter of life and death. This has led to our intense need for community and belonging. Now, I want to be clear that we should not mistake belonging for being social. In our culture, we tend to view the two as going hand in hand, but really belonging means acceptance for who you are, not having to be something that you're not. In most cultures, children are raised to belong, and this is why many cultures see little variation in parenting practices, again, for good or bad. This allows for a level of homogeneity that allows the culture to perpetuate. In our culture, we have many ways of parenting, but if people go against those practices, as we've talked about, they face the social shunning from others. And when these culturally prescribed practices harm their child, they face the biological urge to protect their child. So on the one hand, we have this strong biological urge to care for our children as best as we can, even when we know it goes against cultural goals or beliefs. But on the other, we have a strong biological urge to remain a part of the group for survival. That small part in your hindbrain signals that this public shaming could be more than just embarrassing. It could be life-threatening. And I don't mean this to sound overly dramatic or over the top. It's just simply the way our brains are hardwired. Yes, our brains are evolving slowly, but our culture and our environment have evolved at a far greater rate. We're just trying to play catch up here. Now, hopefully you now have a good grasp of the primary reasons why parenting is so hard in our society. Now, not only do we lack support from peers and our culture, but we also have unrealistic expectations placed on us. We are not at all appreciated for the work we do. We face a constant battle between two biological imperatives, and the goals we have for our children are often in opposition to that of our culture. That is a lot to overcome, but we can, or at least we can try and make it a bit better. And that's what we'll be exploring in section 2.